types of diseases. Basically, we have two different types of disease. We call it as infectious disease and non-infectious disease. When we say infectious disease, it is understood that there is requirement of a pathogen. What are pathogens? It could be a bacteria, it could be a virus, it could be a protozoan, or so on. Now, when these organisms enter into the body and cause infection, and due to that we suffer from a disease, we call it infectious disease. Now, this infectious disease may be transmitted from one person to another. When it is transmitted from one person to another, in such a scenario, we call it as a contagious disease. So, not all infectious disease have to be contagious. For example, if you are going to take an example of amoebiasis, which is caused due to Entamoeba histolytica, and the mode of transmission is contaminated food and water, we call it as infectious disease. But since it is not transmitted from one person to another person directly, we don't call it contagious. On the other hand, AIDS, which is an infectious disease due to HIV, is also being transmitted directly from one person to another. In such a scenario, we will call it contagious disease. On the other hand, non-infectious disease does not spread from person to person. For example, cancer. A cancer patient can never pass on cancer to another person, but due to mutations or due to genetic heredity, the person could suffer. So, that is non-infectious disease. On the similar lines, would like to discuss a word called epidemiology. It is a branch of medicine which deals with the incidence, distribution and possible control of diseases and other factors relating to health. So, what we are basically trying to do is we are understanding how the infection is happening, in what rate is the infection happening, rate of prevalence we call it as. So, at what rate the infection is happening, is there any new outbreak of the disease, in what geographical area is this outbreak happening. So, all these are discussed bit by bit, in which area, what is the how wide is this area, or in terms of what is the rate at which it is spreading, is it controllable, is it not controllable, is it repetitively coming every year, every bit of question we discuss. On this basis, we have 4 different types of epidemiological studies. The first one is sporadic. Sporadic type is non-frequent and it is not a very difficult one or very dangerous one. It is non-frequent, comes in small amounts, goes away just like that. In very low amount, it is affected. But when it comes to endemic, a big area could be affected. So, say an entire Bangalore area being affected, or say a Karnataka zone being affected. So, it is a bigger scenario. But when we are coming to epidemic, this time we are speaking of country, continent. In such bigger, larger picture, the disease is getting spreaded. But the worst scenario is seen when it is pandemic. Today, corona is the best example for pandemic. The entire world gets spread and it does not come under control very easily. The outbreak is repetitive and for a very long time in a greater surface area. So, they are the 4 different types of epidemiological studies what we see.